Welcome to episode 10 of the Terminal to Triathlon podcast and show. And today, this is a solo cast from your host, Mark Bryant. That's me. And the purpose of this show, Terminal to Triathlon, is to help you and become more inspired and educated, empowered, so you can live your best life and achieve your impossible goals. Now, this particular podcast is a solo cast where I will be doing a cancer Q&A answer. So I put a post out on my personal Facebook page, and in that post, a number of people came back and asked me a load of questions in relation to cancer. And I'm in the process of writing my book, Terminal to Triathlon, Heal the Impossible and Come Out Stronger. Now, for those of you that haven't heard, I was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia in 2015, underwent traditional therapy, was looking at alternatives, and 6 months after a stem cell transplant, I had a relapse and my prognosis was considered terminal. So fast forward, 7 years later, I completed an Ironman back in August this year. And so that was the coming together of one of my goals, was to complete an Ironman. And that was one huge piece of my jigsaw puzzle that I was creating whilst I was going through my healing journey. And then 2 weeks ago, I was interviewing my oncologist, and we were talking about letting go. When's the time that we don't have to have any tests anymore? And 24 hours after I had a blood test, he phoned me and said, there's some bad news, some blast cells in your blood. So it's almost like going back to square one and resetting my rudder on my boat and looking at, well, what did I do last time? What do I need to do this time? And just to make sure that whatever work I didn't finish in terms of creating a full recovery for myself, which I fully believe is possible, what are the stones I didn't turn over? What are the areas that I haven't explored, and what's come to the market, what's come to the forefront? What does the new evidence and the science suggest? So what I'll do is I'll go through the questions. And if you've got any questions, I should be able to see them here on in the studio and in the StreamYard studio. So one of the questions from Jason Rathbone was why, and I've had this question as well, is why isn't high dose vitamin C used? And one of the questions from Jill Breeze was in conjunction with mistletoe. Now, I have used IVs in the past, really plugging my nutritional deficiencies in my cells. And when you work with a functional medicine practitioner, they can look at specific deficiencies in your cells to work out which nutrients you need to support that. At the time when I was exploring whether high dose would be a useful strategy, I know Jane McClelland, who's written an amazing book called How to Starve Cancer. And there's a lot of conversation in the cancer world to do with using high dose vitamin C in conjunction with other supplements, I think, or other nutrients as well. So my oncologist at the time that I was working with in America, using low dose immunotherapy, he always was looking to meet the nutritional deficiencies and not overdoing it. So I did experience and have some vitamin infusions at the time that I was going through my healing journey, but I didn't opt at the time for a high dose strategy. That is something that I will look at this time, and I am exploring that because one of my intentions this time is to not have to travel back to America because it costs a lot of money to do that. And I'm just researching everything I can over the next couple of weeks. I'm in a research phase looking, and there's a framework that I've got in fairness. It's called the Path to Unbreakable Resilience. And so I'll share that now so you can understand where I am on my journey, and that might be able to relate to where you or someone you know is on their journey. So when it comes to PATH, is an acronym, PATH. So PATH for me is purpose, and that includes vision, mission, values, and voice. And my vision, my goal is to fully recover. I believe that's fully possible. And it's just a case of finding my path to get there. And so building, so vision, mission is to get well. Values is an important piece of the jigsaw in terms of the emotional part of the healing journey. And I'll cover that in a different conversation if you want. And then the voice is, we have to create our own story. And it's so difficult to go down everybody else's rabbit holes. And, you know, if I listened only to my oncologist in the UK, their determination for me is literally all the treatment is given with palliative intent, and it's not curative for somebody that's in my situation. So I have to look at what's outside of mainstream medicine to build my vision, build my path. So that's a really, and it's not just other people's voices where we start to believe their story, the narrative, population statistics, you know, we have to create our own story, our own inner voice, our own inner blueprint. And what underpins a lot of our behaviors is the beliefs that we hold to be true. And we have the ability to rewrite our own script. We do not have to live in the script of society and culture and mainstream narrative. Like, we can create our own conversation when it comes to creating and achieving impossible goals, which is what this is all about. So A is the activities that we do. Like, we have to shift, we have to do different things, because what we were doing before created the illness for me. So I've looked back over the last few years and looked at, well, I had a period where I had full all clear bone marrow biopsies. And then this last 12 months I've had, you know, it's just been whispering in the background. And I think I've just accumulated stress over the last 12 months. You know, some might say it might have been the Ironman that I did. I think the type of training I was doing, I really enjoyed it. The zone 2 training, a lot of the time, there was not a lot of high intensity stuff. My body enjoyed it. Yes, there was, you know, I haven't measured that. Somebody the other day referred me to a special test. I can see the oxidative stress in my body. So that's something I could look at. But for me, there was other stresses I think played a bigger part in that. There was a financial pressure, finding a new career. That's been really challenging for me, if I'm completely honest, trying to find a new path and a new purpose, so I can be a provider for my family and my children. And then having to deal with an expensive legal claim straight after the Ironman, and going to a mediation, and then having to integrate that, challenge that obstacle, that big speed bump into my life, and feeling powerless because I can't really influence it, because I don't really have a purpose with a job and a career. So I think that was a massive part of the jigsaw for me, is that additional stress. So what have I done in the last few weeks? I've really dialed everything back. The type of training I'm doing, how much time I'm spending in nature, you know, tightening up the nutrition that I've been focusing on. So there's some of the main things I've been doing over the last couple of weeks. So P is path, vision, mission, values, and the voice, the critic. We've got to create our own story. A is the activities, like making adjustments. My coach calls it the AAA rescue method: ask, assess, and address. So ask yourself the questions, assess where you are right now, and then make the adjustments necessary. So the AAA rescue method. Yeah, that was it. So T is team. So at the moment for me, I'm rebuilding a team. So looking at who I've worked with in the past, there's a lot of conversation in the cancer world about a metabolic strategy using off-label drugs. I haven't delved into that in the past. I flirted with the idea a few years ago. So now I'm working, or just about to engage, to work with an expert that's been in the cancer world for the last 22 years and seems to have, with an initial conversation, a fantastic understanding of, you know, what strategies I could add in. And so I'm really excited to integrate that in the next couple of weeks. Now, what I've done and made mistakes in the past is where I've had too many people on my team, and then I get confused as to what I'm going to actually implement and take action on. So I think it's really, really important that you find and build a fantastic team, and then you set about implementing and following a path that you fully believe in. And when I was originally, I've found Hippocrates and I followed their strategy. I followed their blueprint. I worked with their practitioners. And for me, it worked well. So I'm gravitating back towards that strategy. And yeah, I'm now just reestablishing team where I can add in some of the elements that I haven't added in the past. And it's also the H is to have humility. And what I mean by humility is to be open to learning, to be inquisitive, to go and look at changing, creating your story, looking for seeds of inspiration and possibility that you might not have come across in the past. So I'm always a student. I'm always learning. I'm always open to learning. I'm always open to listening to what others have to say. And then I can either choose to adopt their strategies or not. So getting into the Q&A, here we go. So vitamin C, high doses, yes, good strategies. There's lots of practitioners in the UK and around the world that use that. And they do have, from what I've heard, they're amazing strategies. And in the podcast I did with Jane McClelland, which I haven't released yet, she talks about that and how she really does highly rate that. I'm not the sort of guy that's going to go and sit on PubMed and science, like trying to piece all of the scientific jigsaw pieces together. My brain doesn't work like that. I'm more of a strategic thinker. So I have to go and collect lots of little pieces of evidence. And then once I decide on a strategy, if I did decide on vitamin C, high dose, then I would go all in with it. So research is massively important, and not rushing to make a decision is another really important piece of the jigsaw. So Monica asked, why are psychedelics still not used to ease fear? What I do know is that psychedelics, there's a lot of research going into the use of psychedelics from a clinical standpoint. I know there are the colleges in London, there's a hell of a lot of research going into the use of psychedelics, medicinal mushrooms, psilocybin, and MDMA to do with mental health as well. And I think that we will see that coming in to clinical practice and medical practice in the coming years. Obviously, there are ways and means of using psychedelics, and I have used psychedelics as part of my healing journey, and I've found them to be really, really, really useful at different times. So thanks for that question, Monica. Jinder has asked, how do you kill cancer stem cells? How to Starve Cancer, Jane's a great book, and using a metabolic approach. Some might gravitate towards nutrition to create that metabolic strategy. So it's a really good question, something that I'm looking at. So as we come towards the end of the year, what I'll be looking at is creating a kill phase for where I'm at right now to really cleanse, clean out, and target the cancer stem cells. But equally, what I believe is that if you've got that at the foundation, using metabolic drugs, using supplementation, nutrition to help kill the cancer stem cells, we're also looking to feed the healthy cells, the immune cells, because if we can strengthen the natural defense mechanisms of our immune system, then they will go and deal with the killing of the cancer cells. So when I had my immunotherapy treatment with my oncologist, and that is still an option to go back to America, what we were looking to do was to reactivate the natural killer cell function. And so that's what we did over a period of about 2 years that I worked with him. And I'm looking at using a supplement in the UK to try and re-engage my innate army. I would like to go back to work and have some treatment with my oncologist in America. And it's something that I'll look into over the next year at some point. So Great question. And, different cancers behave differently. And so working with someone that really understands, or if you are a bit of a bookworm, you can understand your metabolic pathways of your cancer. And then when you start to block those metabolic pathways, you stop fueling the cancer's ability to reproduce. So therefore, it starves itself to death, and it can't reproduce. So that's the whole idea behind a metabolic approach to cancer. Things like sulforaphane in cruciferous vegetables, particularly little broccoli sprouts, have been proven to be really forceful in the killing of cancer cells. Chris beat cancer. His whole nutritional lifestyle and his supplementation strategy is really aimed at killing the cancer stem cells. So that's a great question. Laura, what questions to ask your primary care team? That's a really good question. It depends who is on your primary care team. And what I found is they know what they know, and they don't know any better. And they will have their own mindset and their own beliefs and their own thinking when it comes to alternative therapies. Some are very encouraging. I've heard of some oncologists that are actually switching to more of an integrative approach. I know of a hematology oncologist that I'm going to have a consultation with that not just works for the NHS as a hematology blood specialist, but I also met him through a consultation I had with one of my family members for them using a metabolic approach to cancer, and looking at off-label drugs prescription. And I discovered that he was a hematology oncologist. So I will be reaching out. I have reached out to him, and I'm going to be having a private consultation with him over the next couple of weeks, because I would love to get his thinking on my situation in terms of, because that's part of my voice, my inner voice. Like, if he can provide me with evidence to support my recovery, that's massive. Like, the placebo effect in healing and recovery is huge. And so that's why I'm looking for him. So with your primary care team, you have to be really, really careful. Be not careful, but open. Like, you can ask them the question. And in my relationship with my oncologist for the last 7 years, he believes still now to some degree that nutritional strategies, once you've been diagnosed with an illness because it's a genetic mutation, there is not much you can do to affect the recovery of that genetic mutation. So whether you're eating healthy or not eating healthy, it doesn't really make a difference. Once you got the illness, you got the illness. And that's a very black and white science view. Whereas you'll go and speak to someone like Jane McClelland or other metabolic practitioners and experts in the world, and they will say it's a metabolic cancer, so we can deal with the metabolic characteristics of a cancer, then we can effectively kill it. So yeah, with a primary care team, you have to acknowledge that they know what they know, and some will be open to looking at alternatives and supporting that, and some won't be. Where to look for a second opinion? Building team is, as an entrepreneur, I've done that for years. And that's where you've got to understand that the primary care team are one part of the jigsaw. They are not the whole recovery team. And the other barrier to some of this alternative or complementary treatments, the other barrier to this is financial investment, because it costs money to build people into your team. Excuse me, I'm just having a drink. So where to look for support? I always direct people to Jane McClelland's book, because mindset medicine is the most important piece of the jigsaw. So, I think that's what I spend most of my time with cancer patients over the last few years when I've spoken to them, and I try and pull their head out of the weeds, is you've just got to look and build your so I suggest go and read Jane McClelland's book, and then you'll start to piece your jigsaw together. If you're looking for second opinions in mainstream medicine, then again, that is something you can do. I know a friend of mine who is working with, one of the world's leading personalized medicine specialists, and there is so much you can do, and that the investment for some of those strategies is quite significant. There are amazing clinics around the world that specialize in cancer and recovery. And again, on the likes of Chris Beat Cancer's course, there is a whole catalogue of potential clinics if you wanted to go and do a deep dive into one of those clinics. So second opinions is really, N equals 1. When you've got cancer, N equals 1. You're an individual. What works for you may not work for someone else. And so you really have to become the captain of your own ship. Learn from others, but build your strategy yourself and with your core team, whether that's your loved ones, your family, your friends. So yeah, that's where do you look for a second opinion? I've never had I found an oncologist in America just by serendipity and by surprise, by luck that I created. And so had I not found him, and I did do what my oncologist suggested in the UK back in 2017, I don't think I would still be here. So, and when I decided to not do what my oncologist in the UK was suggesting and go to America, my oncologist in the UK said, "You're wasting your kid's inheritance." So it was a massive decision for me to go there, and I did. And I believe that was my life-saving decision. So yes, what research and what to avoid? Again, Jane, How to Starve Cancer, Chris Beat Cancer, amazing stories. If you want more of a spiritual story, Radical Remissions is someone else I direct people to. Go and look for a book called Radical Remissions, and there's a catalog online. If you go to radicalremissions.com, I think it is, a doctor has pulled together all the research to catalog sort of the 7 main strategies they found for people that have overcome, what were meant to be incurable illnesses. So why aren't people told they can cure themselves? I think we live in a very science-led, that was Matt Smith that asked that. I think we live in a very science-led society. And so things are black and white when we come to science. And, we are at an inflection point, I think, in the healthcare system. We've got some amazing people in a system that has been set up that doesn't fully support, it's a disease care system, not a healthcare system, unfortunately. And it's really hard to, how do we shift that is a really challenging process where we're going to start to integrate more of an integrative approach to health and healing, where you don't just have an oncology specialist and a surgeon and a radiologist and a nurse practitioner. You also have a functional medicine practitioner, and a functional medicine practitioner going, okay, well, now we've got this illness, we need to use some of the more invasive procedures to deal with a quick stop, and that's where we're amazing. Acute medicine is amazing, heart transplants, stem cell transplants, there's so much good within the healthcare system, but equally, we've just got this huge missing link in terms of the healthcare system, where we're looking more at a functional and holistic approach. So Dr. Dale Bredesen has documented the first 7 patients that have overcome incurable Alzheimer's. Early onset of Alzheimer's, neurological degeneration. And some of the contributory factors are environmental toxins, same for cancer, the viruses and the bacteria that we're exposed to, the heavy metals we're exposed to, the nutritional deficiencies that we now have because of, our lifestyle, the foods that we eat. So, and he's written a book about the 7 Alzheimer patients. And so using a functional approach can reverse illness and help recover those that are going through illness. And Dave Bolton from Ahead of the Game runs a rehabilitation program where he helps using lifestyle medicine, exercise, nutrition, hyperbaric oxygen chambers to help with the recovery process. So you've always got this balance between dealing with the illness and also the recovery phase. And it's interesting when you look at statistics of, the highest prevalence of cancer is in deprived areas and deprived economies in the UK, if you look at just the UK cancer statistics. So lifestyle is such a massive influence when it comes to recovery. So why aren't people told they can cure it themselves? I believe that, like the likes of Anita Moranjani, who did have a next life experience. She wrote a book called Dying to Be Me. She had a 4-year journey with cancer. And there is the psychosomatic aspect of cancer recovery. And that piece of the jigsaw, knowing you, Matt, in terms of your coaching, I think that's a huge piece of the jigsaw. And something that it's hard to contextualize and explain for many. And I hear you when you say that. And to some degree, I'm still looking for that innate switch in me to refire the full life force of my body and my capacity. And there has been whispers of it more so in the last couple of years than before. And I'm feeling more alive for it. So I'm excited to continue to do my own work to find that blocked energy that can be used to exponentially shift my healing journey. So is the chemo the best way to go? My strategy has always been in what I call a synergistic strategy, working with mainstream medicine and working with complementary and alternative therapy. And it's really down to the individual. It's really a case-by-case decision-making process as to working out what strategy is best for the individual, given where they are right now in their disease phase and recovery phase. So it's a hard question to ask. I had the most toxic treatment cancer patients are exposed to. So I do think that some of these medicines, like I've got a second-line chemo now, it's very targeted. It doesn't have the same collateral damage as what you might see as chemotherapy. When somebody says chemotherapy, you think of people puking, losing their hair. But if we think about it, chemical therapy or man-made drugs, you could be taking a paracetamol or an ibuprofen at one end of the spectrum, or you could be having one of the most toxic cancer chemotherapies, chemical therapies that has, atomic effect in the body, which is a cocktail that I had to effectively kill my old immune system and start it again. So again, it's a difficult question to ask, and it's all on an individual by individual basis. What can we do to prevent cancer? Absolutely bucket loads. Nature, connecting with earth, lifestyle, meditation, stress management. There's, just the usual stuff that we all know that we can do. And it's also having the mindset to feel that we're in a good space and place. Because I think emotional stress, probably one of the best books to read at the moment, The Myth of the Normal, I think it's called, by Dr. Gabor Mate. And that's really covering the effect of trauma and trauma lines, like what I'm dealing with in this lifetime is as a result of probably the last 7 lifetimes in my past. So whatever I can clear in this lifetime it will then be cleared for the future generations moving forward, in my case. What are holistic treatments? Again, I call it the Feeling Fresh formula: food, rest, exercise, supplementation and hydration, and elimination as well, detoxification. So really detoxifying the body, infrared saunas, again, detoxifying ourselves from the electromagnetic radiation that we're exposed to through mobile phone technology, Wi-Fi. So, spending time in nature and connecting with nature, not just walking with shoes on, but walking with shoes off, etc. More holistic support. Why? From Yona Davidson. More alternative treatments. Why is Google my best friend and not the professionals? With the way the healthcare system's set up, there has to be clinical population studies carried out, or they've got to build an efficacy for a specific strategy for a specific cancer, and that costs a lot of money. So when drugs are involved, when they make money, it's in their interest to get the scientific study to prove the efficacy of that drug or that medication. And so that's the big piece of the jigsaw. I think we all need to, it needs bringing together, where we do have a primary care team, which includes a functional and lifestyle specialist or support person. Does a person have to carry a specific gene to have stronger chance of beating cancer? I think genes can play a massive component of whether you get cancer and whether you can recover potentially. And genome sequencing is something that has now been introduced into the UK healthcare system since I was diagnosed, and I've just had my full genome sequencing done, not just on the disease, but also on my own individual makeup. And from that picture, it's almost like there's too much information for the current medical understanding to understand what they can do to improve the outcomes for patients. But now we have this information, we can be a lot more strategic with it. So what I would say about genes, the biology belief, Bruce Lipton, is that we can influence our gene expression. We can influence our gene expression through the environment that our genes are in. So, where are all our cells? Inside our bodies. So if we have a nice clean system, emotionally clean, environmentally clean, and nutritionally clean, then we can influence the expression of our genes. And so I do think that I helped create this cancer in the first place because of the stress hormones that my cells were swimming around in. And so that accelerated my aging over a period of time. And therefore, I'm not usually the sort of person that would get cancer or acute lymphoblastic leukemia at that stage and phase in my life. And so what I do realize now is that I can influence my gene expression by my physical, mental, and social well-being. How far have we got to go with this? How does someone get multiple non-related cancers with no family cancer history? That is, again, it's difficult. My mum had lung cancer. I believe that was lifestyle-led, and she got sclerosis of the liver. And so she passed away within a couple of weeks, which was really, really challenging. I don't have anybody else in my family that I know of that had blood cancer. But again, environmentally, you never know what's going on under the hood emotionally. So yeah, it's really hard to, the only person that can answer some of these questions is the person going through the journey. And if they're willing to ask the questions that sometimes can be quite challenging. And yeah, it is difficult when you see people that are going through a very challenging phase. And what I think we have to acknowledge is that, there is an increasing rate of cancer. There's 50% chance of getting cancer in our lifetime. And I was asking my oncologist the other week, do you think the rates are increasing, or we're just getting better at detecting? It's really hard to draw a conclusion on the statistics when I've looked at them, because I'm not a statistics expert by any stretch. So I don't want to place fear by saying that, cancer, there's a disease epidemic. I think what we've got to focus on is the plus side. We live in such an abundant time in it, right now, in terms of the foods we have available, like shifting our lifestyle, cutting out the crap, and improving, because a lot of mainstream, the way in which we live in a Western culture is pretty toxic, in terms of the alcohol consumption, smoking in the past, lack of sleep, burnout. There's lots of factors that can affect our overall health and well-being, mental health. So it's really, the future of medicine is personalized medicine. And so that individual can get their individual needs met, physically, psychologically, mentally. So yeah, that's that. How do negative suppressed emotions and a outlook on development of cancer growth? Huge. One of the best books to read is Louise Hay, Heal Your Life. And in there's all the different illnesses. And for leukemia, it's brutally killing inspiration. So if I can become more inspired and empowered in myself, like, you might see me and I might look like a confident and courageous individual, but beneath the surface, there's a lot of inner turmoil and stress. So how can I express myself more authentically, not trying to live through everybody else's expectations of me, which I'm really good at because it just tires me out. So it's been a really useful anchor for me to come back to and say, come back to Mark, and then move forward from there. So yes, hugely emotional stress can have a huge impact on it. How can chemo results be so widely different from patient to patient? Again, it's individual. It's hard to say what works for one may not work for another. There is a test, I've never done it before, but Crispy Cancer talks about it, where you can actually have a test. So take a blood sample, your blood sample sent off. They can then test a load of different medications on your blood to work out how effective it would be on the cancer. Anyway, so there are tests out there that can be done. So if you find a decent functional medicine practitioner, they may be able to help with that, or an integrative oncologist. What is the impact on your partner and your children? What worries, anxieties do they have for the future with so many unknowns? Good question. I think it's down to the individual going through the cancer, because if they're beaten and they're in victim mode and they're disempowered and they're at the mercy of their healthcare team saying there's nothing else we can do, and they just slip further down, then I think that's very difficult. I think that's very, very difficult. And each person's family will be unique to them. I think my children see in me, and Fiona sees in me, that I'm strong-minded, strong-willed, and will do whatever it takes. And we've done it before, so we can do it again. So I think they have more certainty this time than we did the last time, because we didn't know the last time what the outcomes were going to be. So yeah, it is huge. And my kids are always asking, are you okay? How do you feel today? So there is a layer of anxiety, but I communicate how I'm feeling. And it's important for me to maintain focus, and draw my attention and actions towards my full recovery, and showing them that anything is possible, if they put their minds to it. With a terminal diagnosis, should treatments include all the family and the patients to include as much information as each individual needs for their journey? When I found out I was considered terminal, I decided to shut the book, and not believe that I was terminal. So I think that's a question for the individual to ask, is, they might be considered terminal in relation to, they might be considered medically terminal, in terms of what their usual prognosis would be, but only the individual can muster the strength to say, I'm not believing that, I'm going to crack on and go this way. And that's essentially what I did, what I've done twice, or possibly 3 times now. But I do think that when it comes to mental health, I think we're so far removed from death that it's difficult for some to appreciate that life doesn't last forever. So really being in the present, enjoying and enriching every moment that somebody's got to live, is an important piece of the jigsaw. Now, is it worthwhile that everybody trucks up to the hospital and sits in the consultations? Generally, I go with Fiona, or I've been on my own, and I feel okay to deal with that. And everybody's unique, Colin, so it's up to them as to how they best deal with it. So what about high dose vitamin C and mistletoe? Again, I've covered that earlier. Natural remedies for healing, Nia. You know the strategies, just in terms of lifestyle, mental health, physical health, spiritual health. Maripath Carabola, why did I give a fuck about the small stuff? Yeah, that's true. I was mega stressed 2 weeks ago. I'm less stressed now than I was 2 weeks ago before I found out, because I don't sweat the small stuff now. It's like, it is what it is, and we'll find a way. So I completely agree with you with that. It's like, we carry so much stress about the small stuff, we forget about the really important stuff. So yeah, I completely resonate with you with that. Nayu, Justin McGurk, yes, Louise Hay, I've already covered that, in terms of the emotional factors that play into cancer creation. Is it a great idea to say no to chemotherapy, have cancer slip out of control and die in a terrible pain? So is it a great idea to say no to chemo, have cancer slip out of control? Again, Dimitri, this is an individual journey, and only, making a decision to or not to have chemotherapy is a very massive decision, and has to come with a very individualized and personalized assessment of the risks and benefits, and only the individual going through that, understanding, what's the outcome statistics of this, what are the potential side effects of taking the chemotherapy, what else am I going to do alongside not having that. So I think everybody's journey, and and if somebody's particularly old, and frail, then they may decide that that is a better path for them not to have it. So I think everybody's decision is very, very unique. And, that's the way I like to look at disease recovery, is N=1, is exactly the way my oncologist in America looks at cancer. It's like, look, Mark, your path is you and your journey, and somebody else will be doing these other things. So the sooner we can adopt a personalized medicine approach, which includes a functional strategy, including all of the things I've talked about, psychedelics, THC, nutrition, supplementation, detoxification, these are all important strategies when it comes to recovery. So Brenda asked, as an onlooker, how can I help you? How should I be? I may need to explain, but how can I tell the stage acceptance denial you are in, and how best to be there to support? I think everybody has to navigate their own ship. And how best can you support, Brenda, is to be open, to ask insightful questions, and ask, is there anything I can do to help? There are stages of healing, which I think are really useful, which will be in the Terminal to Triathlon book. And those stages of healing, which I can share with you now, which I thought was very good, is denial, shock. And then we move into recognition, and acceptance. Once we've moved in acceptance, right, now I accept this, what can I do to shift it? It's these are more of a spiritual, accept it, release it, reflect upon it, bring some emptiness, integration, and transformation. I think that you only need to ask. You just be open and be there to support a cancer patient. And at the end of the day, they are the captain of the ship. And only if I'm trying to help someone, and I know there's stuff that we can do to help that individual, but they're resistant to doing anything other than what the primary care team are offering them. And so the only hopium they're smoking is what mainstream medicine can offer. And I know that there is so many different things, or there are not so many, there is lifestyle and functional medicine that can support a recovery journey and ease the process. It's really difficult to try and get somebody on board. You can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And sometimes you just have to let them be on their boat, sailing in the direction that they want to sail in. And it's only down to their own inquisitiveness and their own self-empowerment to believe that something is possible. Because if they believe something's not possible, they're not going to get better. And so the mindset is probably one of the most important pieces of the jigsaw in cultivating spirit, in cultivating strength to overcome any goal, not just getting a well goal. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of the podcast, a bit of a Q&A. I hope I made sense. If you do have any other questions as a result of this, please drop them in the comments below and I'll come back to them. And I will integrate some of what I've shared and try and make it a little bit more structured in my book, Terminal to Triathlon, which I am busy working on and hopefully will have done. No, I will have done by the 30th of November. So you can buy it. I'll pre-sell it. So let's get it done. And thank you for listening. If you've got any questions, drop them below. Have a wicked weekend.